Welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Michael Crossan.
And I'm Kelly Funkhauser.
So today on Talking Cars, we are going to talk about the 2023 Toyota Prius Prime. The word Prime is Toyota speak for their plug-in hybrids, as in the RAV4 Prime, which we've also tested. No word yet if Deion Sanders is going to ink an endorsement deal with Toyota, Prime time. Okay, you got that. Good. Some Toyota estimates, and this is really what people want to know about plug-ins. Toyota estimates that drivers can get up to 44 miles of electric-only range from a Prius Prime SE on a full charge, which should take about 11 hours using a standard 110-volt household outlet, or 4 hours on a 240-volt charger.
Which is pretty slow, actually. That's 44 miles in 4 hours. That's on a 240 volt. That takes quite a while.
It's like 44 miles an hour.
10 miles an hour, kind of. Yeah, that's a long time.
I'm not good at math.
That's okay. We'll forgive you.
And it's worth noting that since the Prime SE gets 44 miles on electric-only range, the upper trims, the XSE and the XSE Premium trims, get 39 miles differences in wheels and tires. It's going to affect your overall electric driving range. But the EPA estimate for the Prius Prime SE is 52 miles per gallon combined once the battery is depleted. That's just 5 miles per gallon less than the most efficient version of the regular Prius. Higher trims get 48 miles per gallon combined. So the good news also is that there's a lot of advanced safety features for the Prius Prime that come standard, including automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane departure warning, blind spot warning, and rear cross traffic warning. And we bought a mid-level XSE model, which comes very nicely equipped, including heated front seats and steering wheel, 19-inch wheels, and a wireless phone charger. We added the 12.3-inch infotainment system, an enormous fixed glass roof, and a few other odds and ends. And with the $1,095 destination fee, the price came to $39,004. So, Mr. Crossan, let's start with you, and let's talk about how is the Prime different than the regular Prius?
So aside from the obvious that you can just plug it in, right, making it the plug-in hybrid, it has a larger lithium-ion battery pack that then you can plug in and charge. So we're getting more electric-only range, and it will operate more like an EV. And when you drive it, it almost seems like an EV, at least until you deplete that charge and the gas motor turns on. And of course, depending on what mode you're on. There are 3 modes. There's an EV auto mode that basically relies on the battery for that EV-like driving experience. There's like a hybrid EV or a high voltage EV, an HV EV mode that basically lets the engine work a little more sort of automatically. It'll turn on for higher power demands or maybe going up a steep hill, something like that. And then there is regular hybrid mode as well, and it just kind of switches back and forth basically the way a regular Prius does, kind of what we're used to.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of looked into some of the real physical differences between the two.
The biggest difference you would maybe think is that you're losing some space inside because you have this larger capacity battery, but there's actually no difference in cargo and rear sort of fitment and everything like that. So they did a really good job with packaging.
Which is not always the case.
Absolutely.
With hybrids and plug-ins, because they're usually those batteries are taking up cargo space or whatnot.
Some sort of space. In fact, we were thinking, well, where is the battery then? And it really didn't suffer in terms of the cargo space. It seems like they smartly used maybe some of those small areas that were open and kind of placed it strategically.
Yeah, I think they just moved some things around, in the sort of the undercarriage of the vehicle, and just did a really nice job with packaging in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how about the weight differences?
So yeah, there is a weight difference. The regular Prius was 3,308 pounds, the one that we had purchased, and this Prime is 3,549. And if my math is right, that's 241 pounds more for the Prime. So that's going to equate for the larger battery pack. Plus, you also have the charging port, and there's some extra wiring and some modules and things to go along with those. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can plug the vehicle in. So that 240 pounds. I sort of think you can feel it when you drive the car versus the regular Prius, but there is a lot of benefit of being able to plug this in and sort of the extra EV-ness of this vehicle as well. So there's a trade-off there, but is it a nice trade-off? I think maybe.
And speaking of trade-off, what if you're living where it snows?
So that is sort of a drawback here. You can't get the all-wheel drive in the plug-in. And again, that's going to be because of sort of equipment. They probably had to use some of that space where the all-wheel drive stuff was to have some of this EV stuff. So If you need that all-wheel drive, if you really want that, you're looking at just a regular Prius, which is not a bad choice. Honestly, it's a very good car. But if you want to have the ability to plug this in, if the whatever range model you choose, right? Because we have a little bit of difference here depending on the trim level. If that works, let's say for your round trip commute, and you really want to try to utilize that, just know that you're going to have a front wheel drive car.
Right. So Kelly, the new Prius has a new feature called Traffic Jam Assist, which uses a driver monitoring system. Make sure the driver's eyes are on the road, paying attention and whatnot. What did you think of this, and how is the rest of the Prime's usability and ADAS features?
Yeah, so let's start with Traffic Jam Assist. I'm going to give a little bit of background and explainer on what this feature is specifically, because a lot of brands and manufacturers have something similar. Oftentimes they use the same word, Traffic Jam Assist. What it is basically is it uses the lane centering feature and the adaptive cruise control, which you can use on most cars at all speeds. But in this case, under 25 miles per hour, if you are above that and following a car in front of you, which then causes your adaptive cruise control to slow, because if there's no car in front of you, it's not going to slow on its own, right? So there's a car in front of you and you slow down to below 25 miles per hour in this car. Others do 40 miles per hour, so a lower speed. Then you now enter this Traffic Jam Assist mode, which is essentially doing the same things that it was doing above 25 miles per hour, except now it uses the driver monitoring camera, which is an infrared camera mounted on the steering wheel column, looking at the driver's eyes. So now you've entered Traffic Jam Assist mode, and it allows the drivers to have their hands off the steering wheel for extended periods of time.
For whatever reason.
Yes, exactly. So as long as your eyes are on the road, then they're saying you can have your hands off. So that happens when you are under 25 miles per hour. Then if the traffic speeds up again and you go above 25 miles per hour, then there's a little bit of leeway there, and then it kind of goes back out of Traffic Jam Assist mode. So that's kind of how it works.
Okay, and that is just part of the pretty high tech that's going into this car, right?
Yeah, so this car comes with lots of features, and I was driving it last night, and I know we've all talked about this several times before, but when you're using all of these ADAS driver assist features, it's very much an alphabet soup experience, because for some reason Toyota tends to just use acronyms galore, and only acronyms. So there's little to no information in the center screen, the infotainment system about what these features are. Everything is in the driver display. So you use the steering wheel controls to kind of toggle these things on and off. And that's all the information you're going to get. Most of them are acronyms. So I went through the driver assist menu and put the acronyms onto this paper in front of me here. So I'm going to read them to you guys. And because they don't use the whole words, I'm going to have you guess a couple of these to see if you can figure out what they are. I'll start with some easy ones. I'm going to go with you first.
Okay.
Mike Crossan. You ready for this? Okay. BSM. What do you
Blind
think?
spot monitoring.
All right. You got that one. Okay. Quincy. PCS.
PCS. Oh, gosh. Passenger control sensor.
Nice guess. Nice. It's pre-collision system.
Okay.
So again, yeah, but all you see is PCS. We'll do another one. PDA. I think you might know this one.
Public display.
Yeah, nice. Proactive driving assist, which we can talk about in a second here. Then there's others. RCTA, rear cross traffic, alert, and then they have PKSB.
I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, which is basically the parking brake.
Okay.
Or not parking brake, sorry. It's when you're doing a parking maneuver. It's like the automatic emergency braking type thing, right? So you don't run into the wall.
Do I get partial credit for the word
You get
parking?
partial credit, yeah. And then we have RSA, which is road sign assist. So it's looking at the traffic signs.
Okay.
DRCC.
Absolutely no idea.
That's their name for their adaptive cruise control, which is dynamic radar cruise control.
Oh, yeah. That's much easier than ACC.
Right. DMC, which is their driver monitoring camera.
I thought it was DeLorean motor car.
I thought it was Run DMC.
LCA, which we know is
Lane keep assist.
Lane centering, yep. And new one, FCTA.
Forward collision traffic warning.
You're so close. It's forward cross traffic alerts. Yeah, so they use alert instead of warning, so that's the A. So it's basically the rear cross traffic warning, but they have it in front. And this feature is somewhat controversial amongst testers here that drive the vehicles, because sometimes what happens is it's almost too sensitive in a way. You come up to a stop sign,
right,
and of course there's a car crossing in front of you. You can see that coming from, either direction, and then it starts beeping at you. So, rather than in a parking lot where you're going to use the rear cross traffic when it's helpful, this one kind of is one of those annoyances or frustrations.
What you said, this feature is controversial among our testers here. It's not going to be the only one that we're going to get into. Okay.
Exactly.
And with that, let's kind of just transition to how this car drives. And Mike, you talked about how it's different than the regular Prius. For most plug-in hybrids, you can choose when to use your electric-only power, or you can just kind of let it be and do what it wants to. But with your time in the Prius Prime, what did you think?
So I actually picked this car up at the dealer. I wasn't the one who purchased it, or I guess I'll say shopped the car, but I did pick it up, and I drove it most of the way back here to ATC just on full electric range. It wasn't quite fully charged when I picked it up, but it was close. And I got a really good range out of it, and it was a really nice, pleasant experience. And then when it did go into sort of its regular hybrid mode, it was basically just like the regular Prius.
Which we've also tested.
Exactly. But it was nice to get that sort of the big initial hit, let's say, the big initial chunk of range on electric power like an EV. We'll all spend a bunch of time in EVs, and at one point they were kind of new, but I think they've all sort of grown on us in certain ways a little bit. And like the silent operation I find wonderful. I love the instant torque of the motor. That's very addictive. You can just sort of one pedal drive very easily. So I think in a lot of ways it's very nice, and we've come to sort of expect that out of a lot of cars, and it's nice to see that showing up in this vehicle.
So I want to say one comment on what you just said about the silent acceleration. So yes, you're technically right on the silent acceleration, but I will say that as I was driving it, I actually had to double check myself. When I was in EV only mode, there was a lot of road noise, wind noise, and vibration from the vehicle. Very similar to when you might think the engine is on, and it wasn't silent or quiet all the time. So yes, acceleration, the rapid instant torque is awesome, but the vehicle overall wasn't super quiet.
Correct.
Like other EVs that we've come to expect.
Definitely. That's certainly been our experience. The Prius Prime does make a wide variety of noises. Sometimes it sounds like a spaceship.
Yeah, I had to check myself several times that I was in EV only mode, because when you switch back or have even the auto on and it switches, there's not a whole lot of noticeable difference in the noise between the hybrid and the EV mode, because it's kind of that noisy.
Yeah, I took the Prime up to Vermont the previous weekend, and so got to spend a lot of time with it. Regular highway driving, a lot of back roads driving. I did remember, because sometimes for me, it's like I forget that you have all this EV range and you can save it. So I did once I got off the highway into the back roads of Vermont. That's when I used it, which was really kind of nice. But the driver monitoring system, when you're just in normal driving and you look down for a second at the screen to say, oh, what song is that playing? And it beeps at you and it yells at you. It's like, keep your eyes on the road. And the cross traffic thing also was so intrusive from my perspective. I pulled over the side of the road and went into to turn off a lot of this stuff, because I found it so annoying and so hyper. And it's like, I know Toyota's kind of a conservative company. They always want to play it safe, but the settings I felt from the factory were so intrusive. I wanted them gone.
Yeah, there's a lot of beeping going on, and even the screen beep when the feedback when you're touching the screen has a too high pitch of a tone, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of noise and beeps that can be annoying. I foresee a lot of owners kind of navigating into some of those menus and trying to figure out, first of all, what it is that's causing the beeping,
right,
and then navigating the acronyms to figure it out, and then probably turning it off.
Right.
Definitely.
It's almost like they need to have the owner's manual in their hand when they're looking at the abbreviations. Like, okay, which one is that again? You have to keep going back and forth.
Yeah, and I should point out that even worse is that on the Toyota website, they've done a good thing and a bad thing, which is where they really have started to adopt some of the standard industry standard terminology from Clearing the Confusion, which of course Consumer Reports, co-authors. but now it doesn't match the terminology in the vehicle. So if you go on there to learn about it, now it's another level of decoding that you have to do, unfortunately.
A few steps forward, a few steps back.
And I also think too, a lot of like the pictographs that they use can be a little confusing. You have to really know what they mean. I do some of the initial testing on the vehicle, and to do what I have to do in those, I have to turn basically everything off to do the things I need to do to make happen. And it takes a minute in all of these Toyotas or Lexuses to remember A, where they are, B, how to get there and turn them off, and then which ones I actually need off. Right. So I do have to reference that owner's manual a lot. I can definitely see that be frustrating, as a new owner to this vehicle.
Yeah.
I will say I'm still kind of taken by the Prius's styling. I think it looks cool. I think this is the neatest looking Prius Toyota has ever put out. I've driven every generation Prius. This is by far my favorite. But the question is, the Prime, the plug-in benefit that you're getting, is more expensive than the regular Prius. Our regular Prius was $33,909 versus the $39,004 for the Prime. But Kelly, I'm gonna throw this to you. Is it, you think it's worth it? And if you were not working at Consumer Reports, would this be the kind of vehicle that would fit into your life?
Yeah, it's really dependent on the lifestyle. 44 miles, better than previous gen, but it's not a lot, right? So you have to be strategic about when and where you're going to use it. So if you're doing a lot of short trips and, you don't have to make any, longer trips to work or anything like that, then maybe it makes sense, because then you can use just pure electric a lot of the time, and then have hybrid when needed. The downside of that, though, is with such a small capacity, you really do have to plug it in every single time you take it out anywhere. And that can be an annoyance. You come back and you've got shopping bags and everything to bring in, and it's just one of those extra annoyances. So dependent on your lifestyle. But I will say that in the Prius Prime, the ability to switch between the EV only and the hybrid is a very simple button on the center console that you can easily do that. I know we've been testing a lot of these plug-in hybrids, and some of them you have to go several layers deep in the menu in the screen, and then you kind of leave that screen open so you can toggle it back, and now you lose access to your screen and everything. So that's a nice thing. That's convenient. So if you are going to be doing that, at least it's easy to do so.
All right, but you're kind of...
I kind of pivot. I didn't really answer the question.
From the actual answer. So let's just say that you have the commute you have now, where you live in Connecticut to a different part of Connecticut, and you had to buy a car. Would you consider getting if you wanted to be fuel efficient, kind of a green consumer? Would you go, $6,000 more, $7,000 more to get the plug-in?
I probably wouldn't, because I don't see, again, the noise. I like a silent EV. I didn't see a lot of those benefits. You really have to learn how to drive a plug-in and be strategic with using it in the city, and then go to the hybrid engine on the highway. It just almost becomes a chore to drive it to get the maximum value out. So I probably wouldn't choose it.
Okay. Michael, same question.
Yeah, my daily commute is too far to take advantage of that pure sort of EV range, even in one way, right? I'm going further than that 44 miles. Plus, then I think about just my charging situation at home. I have a home charger, but I have a lot of cars in my driveway, and I have to put the car sort of in a specific spot if I'm going to charge it, which usually necessitates moving a bunch of vehicles. So that becomes annoying. And it's one thing if you have an EV for the weekend, yeah, I understand I got to move these cars because I need to charge this. But it's a lot of money between the Prime and just the regular Prius. The regular Prius gets really good fuel economy. It drives really well. So if I was interested in a Prius, I would probably buy the regular Prius.
Okay. All right. Well, we have 2 votes for regular, none for Prime. For me, I'm kind of split, because my normal commute is pretty short. So I would go months maybe without buying gasoline.
And you can charge at work, right? So you can charge at home, even if you were 40 miles away.
I've got a level 2 charger at my house. It's easy for me to get to.
And you'll need at least 4 hours.
Yeah, that's so from that perspective, it would make all the sense in the world to me. However, I'm a road trip junkie. Yeah. I love driving long distances all the time. And I think from that perspective, a plug-in doesn't make as much sense, because most of the time you're just carrying around a lot of extra weight.
Absolutely.
And so your regular internal combustion engine fuel economy comes down. I will say that the extra weight that our Prime has over the regular Prius, I think, hunkers the ride down. I think handling feels, more solid, not quite as light in its feet, not as agile, obviously, but I think the Prime maybe is a little quieter and rides a little better than the regular one. Sometimes that's an experience we've had in other plug-in hybrids versus regular hybrids. I think that's the case with the Prime now, but certainly the jury for Consumer Reports on this vehicle is out because we have not done finished testing it. Just a reminder, this is kind of our first look at this pretty green and very high-tech car. So check back with consumerreports.org for more information as we put in the break-in miles on the Prime and start the testing. And also check out Talking Cars podcast number 429 if you want more information on the enormous testing effort that we've initiated with a wide variety of plug-in models, just like this Prius Prime. And that brings us to our audience questions. We love your questions. Text 30-second videos. Send them all to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. And first up, we love these video questions. First up is a video question, and this is Candy from Canada.
Hi, CR. Candy from Canada here. First off, shout out to Mike Quincy, the goofy oddball with interesting car choices. I used to have a 2012 Scion TC that just got totaled and it broke my heart. There is nothing really out there like that anymore. So can you think of a nice funky replacement vehicle for that? I was looking at a 2011 Honda CRZ that I've never heard of before. I'm wondering if it's a good idea to get that because of, maintenance and parts. So what are your thoughts?
I've got a fan. I never imagined that would happen. And Candy from Canada, I love the alliteration of this. And so replacement for a Scion TC. A Scion is not a car brand that we talk to very much these days. And possibly getting into a used Honda CRZ or Z, small, sporty, fuel efficient. Mr. Crossan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think maybe Candy is onto something here. However, the CRZ, I've actually never driven one. So just in full honesty, I've never sat in one, never driven one, anything like that. But I did talk to Joe. He actually bought the CRZ for Consumer Reports when we went through and did the testing. So I kind of got some insight from him. And some of the things he sort of described, I think does fit in line with what Candy's actually looking for. Coming out of that Scion TC, a small front-wheel drive, economical, little sporty car. But let's face it, those Scion TCs were like a little funky and a little sort of just a little different, right?
Yeah,
and I think the CRZ also is in that same sort of realm. It sort of fits that same bill. A little quirky, little funky, a little different. I don't know if the car was really what everybody hoped it to be, when it first came out. I think Mike, you were talking about how they kind of build it as like the CRX is back.
The CRX replacement, which had the same silhouette. It had the look to it.
It sure does.
But when it came to driving it, it couldn't have been more vastly different than the CRX.
So yeah, I don't think it really filled that role. However, I will say I haven't seen one of these. I couldn't even tell you when the last time I saw one was. But I got emailed this question yesterday, and on the way home last night, I actually saw one at an intersection. So, Candy, I don't know if that's the universe telling you that you should actually buy one of these, but I did see one yesterday.
That's interesting. Kelly, she's obviously into something that's small and fuel efficient. Do you think she should take the plunge here or something else?
So I also talked to someone. So I talked to Alex Nizek, who sits next to me, and was like, hey, what do you know about this vehicle? And he said that several years ago, he actually looked into buying one of these himself. Mm-hmm. And he said it's funky, but in a different and its own way, because especially for a 2011 or any year, really, it's rare to find a hybrid that you could also get in a manual transmission.
Right.
So it's got its own little quirk if you want that aspect of it. He said, though, very similar things. It's small and it's fuel efficient, but the drive is probably not as sporty feeling as the Scion that you'd be coming from. He suggested if you're looking at that, generally maybe go with the Honda Insight. Mm-hmm. But if you want the sporty feel, maybe not this car, but it's got its own unique quirks to it. So there's something there.
So I was actually here when we bought and tested a CRZ. Acceleration was not impressive. It looks sporty, but really doesn't drive that sporty. Pretty noisy, and the CRZ in our test returned 35 miles per gallon overall. For 2011, that wasn't bad. It was still kind of behind the Toyota Prius of that era, but by 2023 standards, 35 miles per gallon is nothing to write home about.
Especially for such a small two-seater, two-door car.
Right.
And the CRZ was discontinued after 2016. And Michael, you worked in dealerships and you know what it's like, for parts availability. The CRZ, in terms of mechanical replacement parts, probably won't be too much challenge, but like the body panels.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the mechanic in me worries about that. And I would say, wiper blades and air filters and oil filters, that stuff is not going to be a problem. But yeah, if you need to replace like a whole headlight housing, that's going to be tough. They're just not everywhere, right? And I do think that's also part of the issue you run into when shopping for one of these. It's not like every car dealer is going to have one on the lot like they might have a regular Civic or a Prius. Mm-hmm. So you have less to choose from just in the market, and don't want anybody to be forced like, I'm buying this one because it's the only one that exists.
Right.
And it might not be the best example sort of in your geographical area. So that's always a concern too. On the flip side, I think it is a bit of an enthusiast car and has a bit of a following. So people maybe tend to take a little better care of those cars because they really like them. But again, there's no guarantees.
Right. But if it's an enthusiast, they've all been modified and, well, yeah,
possibly. I think some people did that. And I think some people just they like the look. And at the time, it was a reasonably efficient, not quite like the Prius, but
right.
35 wasn't terrible, 8-10 years ago. But, by current standards, right. that's pretty low.
So Candy, I would say I would look into a used Honda Fit, especially if you had the manual transmission with your TC and you liked it, you liked the fuel efficiency, you liked the hatchback design. I would look for one of those. Honda sold way more Fits than they did CRZs. So your chances of finding a decent used one probably go up. Your chances of replacement parts probably much better.
Absolutely.
But whatever car you choose, Candy, I hope it's sweet.
Nice.
Had to get that in. And let us know, Candy, what you finally decide.
Yeah.
We'd love to get
interested to hear.
And our last question is Adil from New Jersey, who writes, I've recently purchased a 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5 all-wheel drive, and I also have a 2019 Acura RDX with super handling all-wheel drive. I was recently driving through a heavy rainstorm in the Acura, and it got me thinking about how the Ioniq 5 would compare to the RDX in terms of all-wheel drive capability, particularly in bad weather. As far as all-wheel drive capability of EVs, I know we talk about it more in the context of providing additional acceleration or torque, but in terms of all-wheel driveness, that's a good word, how do the EVs of today compare to their internal combustion competitors? So, Mr. Crossan, again, I'm going to turn to you first.
Sure.
Go for it.
So, all-wheel drive, in the part of the country we live in, that's basically kind of what dealers stock, unless it's a rear-wheel drive only car or a front-wheel drive only car. And definitely, if you live somewhere with weather, like we have, all-wheel drive should be a consideration. I think the biggest thing, though, as always, is tires. That's the thing that touches the road and is dealing with the water and the snow and the ice. And when you think about it, if we all hold up our hand, the size of your hand is about the contact patch on a tire. So you have 4 of those, unless you're driving a dually, then you have 6. So the tires are going to be the biggest choice, whether it's rain or snow or ice. So depending, New Jersey, they get winter too. Maybe not quite as much as Connecticut, but I guess it depends on where you are. All-wheel drive helps. It really helps you get moving. But once you're moving, the all-wheel drive part is kind of out the window. If you're a really skilled driver, it can help you like mid-corner do some things and maneuver the car. But for most people, it's really just to get you going, to get you out of that like sort of snowbank that you might be parked in on the side of the road, or if it's a little slippery, like leaving an intersection that's maybe uphill. So tires are the biggest thing. So I took a look at both our Ioniq 5 and then when we had the RDX. They both came on all-season tires, which is great. In most cases, all seasons work for most people unless you have extreme winter where you live. They're both all-wheel drive. Last year we didn't have a crazy winter here in Connecticut, so we had a little bit of snow, but I was in the EV6 and the Volkswagen ID4 up in Mass in some pretty heavy snow, and they both did really well, both on all-season tires. And I haven't driven the RDX. Haven't driven the RDX in the snow. But I think the big thing here is just simply tires. And then when the weather is bad, you just got to slow down a little bit.
Right.
There's only so much traction available, so just dial that speed back. Whether it's your fear is hydroplaning or sliding in snow and slush, just dial the speed back and make sure you have really good tires on the vehicle.
And Kelly, you grew up in Utah. You've been living many years here in Connecticut,
hills
in the
and snow and rain. Yes.
So have you noticed any real differences when you're driving electric vehicles in terrible weather?
It's not necessarily the electric vehicle versus the ICE or internal combustion gas, engine. I'm going to double down on the tires comment, right? And the factor with EVs and tires is the weight, right? There's weight plus the instant torque and the acceleration in EVs tend to wear those tires down faster. So staying on top of making sure you have in good condition tires for handling the weather is the more important factor.
Yeah, right. And I've got nothing really more to add to that, because you guys absolutely nailed it. The tire answer is always the right answer.
And the only thing I'll add to the EV part of this is EVs have regenerative braking. And you can, in a lot of cars, particularly the Hyundai, you can dial that in with basically like paddles or buttons. You have some choice there. When you read the owner's manuals in these cars, they tell you not to use heavy regenerative braking in poor weather, specifically snow. I'm hoping we actually get a lot of snow this year so I can go out and play with those. But basically, you're going from regen braking to then if the car slides, then like ABS and traction control has to step in, versus if you're just sort of on the brake pedal, sort of the ABS says, I don't want to say it's ready, but it's kind of there and ready to take over if there is a slide. So definitely driving an EV in some weather, particularly snow, turn down that regen and get out a one pedal drive and drive it like a normal vehicle. And again, dial your speed back and just be kind of gentle on that brake pedal and you should be okay. But again, provided you have good tires.
That is great advice. Consumer Reports has a number of articles on all-wheel drive where we talk about how all-wheel drive systems are definitely not created equal. Check it out at consumerreports.org. And that will about do it for this episode, which was produced by super producer Andrew Berlise, and of course, ably assisted and edited by Anatoly the Great Shumsky. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we've discussed. And just a reminder, please keep your questions coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.